Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. We've got a great event planned tonight. My name is Tony Marino. I'm the town manager here in Ipswich. Thank you for coming. I want to welcome everyone to the Ipswich POW MIA Missing in Action Share of Honor Ceremony. I want to recognize all of our elected officials that came, Linda Alexson, Tammy Jones from the Select Board, and most importantly, all of our veterans in attendance. Thank you for your service. And special thanks to Karen Tyler, who without her this ceremony would not be possible. She set this all up, ordered the chair, really grabbed hold. So thank you, Karen, for all your efforts to put this together. We appreciate it. And for all of those who can you please rise? All of you who can stand, please rise. Kendall Sakara will come up and sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets raked the air, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If I could just ask everyone to remain standing just while we have the invocation. Chaplain Robert LaRoe.
Shall we pray? Lord of hosts, a table is set before us in honor of those who answered the call to defend freedom and resist tyranny. We pay homage this evening to those who've been taken prisoner in battle, for the hardships they faced, for the courage to persevere and battle despair. We also honor those missing, their fates unknown, with families who for decades have lacked closure. They have dealt with the pain of not knowing. These heroes, these loved ones are missing. They are not forgotten. Lord God, we intercede for America today. You are refuge. Help us to follow in the tradition of those who have marched before us without fear. Our confidence is in you, O Lord. May our resolve be to ever remain one nation under God. We offer our lament with hope in your strong and mighty name. Amen.
Thank you. You can please be seated. We are here today to present Ipswich's Chair of Honor. Chair of Honor is very simple, yet powerful. It's a single bag chair, as everyone can see, with the POW MIA logo on it, which is then flanked by the American flag and the POW MIA flag. Along with the chair is a plaque that states, since World War II, over 81,000 servicemen remain unaccounted for. This chair is in their honor until they come home. They will not be forgotten. These chairs of honor are currently in locations like Gillette Stadium, TD Garden, and Fenway Park, along with over 100 cities and towns spread throughout Massachusetts and now across the country, and we're proud to have one here in Ipswich. The plaque for the Chair of Honor was made by a disabled veteran out in South Dakota, and we thank him for that. The POW MIA flag that you see hanging here on the wall, to my right or your left, includes all the names of the POW MIAs from Massachusetts. Ipswich resident Arthur Hardy was missing in action in Vietnam, and his father, Gordon Hardy, is here in attendance, down here in the second row. Thank you for being here, we appreciate it. The stars next to people's names on the flag represents those whose remains have been returned, and our Department of Defense is always continuing the search for other service members to bring home. Recently, our President signed the National POW MIA Flag Act into law. This new law requires that POW MIA flags be displayed whenever the American flag is displayed on federal properties. We are working to have this flag displayed on our flagpoles around town, to include the flagpole here at Town Hall. I would now like to introduce our keynote speaker, Jim Kurtz. He is the author of The Green Box, which is a story of his search to better understand his father's military experience. His father, Second Lieutenant Robert Kurtz, served in the United States Army Air Corps during World War II and has been a POW. Here is our keynote speaker, Jim Kurtz.
Good evening. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to be here tonight for the Chair of Honor dedication. My father was both MIA and POW during his service in the Army Air Force final months of World War II. Now, if you will, I would like to share with you the story of my journey to find a father that I never really knew. This is a picture of my father before the war in 1939 at the White Plains Railroad Station, looking healthy and happy on his way into New York City to go to NYU. This is where he met my mom on the train that day, and that's another part of the story that is in my book, but it's nothing to do with what we need to talk about tonight. He spent 1 year at Bowdoin, it didn't work out, and my mother spent 1 year at Sweetbriar, and that didn't work out, and luckily for me, this did work out. Then he was he was actually drafted and inducted in 1941, went to Fort Dix, and then assigned to artillery at Camp Davis in North Carolina. Now my mom tells me that he had a great sense of humor. So she sent her this picture, and as you can see, if you can read it, he was complaining a little bit about the Army food. So he stood next to a sign that said, "Gas alarm for gas attack only." He had a good sense of humor. And then when I discovered the green box in my attic as an 8-year-old, this is one of the things that I found in there that didn't make any sense to me for a long time. And then probably 30 years later, I was looking at it again when researching my book, and all it says is, "Keep your chin up, honey, I love you always." This is before my dad and my mom got married. And I was wondering, well, why would you send that? And if you can look closely, I don't know if you can see it, but I can tell you the date is December 7th, 1941. Japanese had just bombed Pearl Harbor. Basically, he's telling my mom that they are in for the long haul. And then he was off to training. He was accepted in the Air Corps, and he went to California to train. It's a picture of him where he trained on single engines out in Lancaster, California. My mom went home, and basically they had a long-term relationship, and eventually were married. And he went from there, they got married, he went to Marfa, Texas for his wings. My mom joined him along with my oldest brother, who actually lives out here on the neck, Bob. And this is a picture, once they left Marfa, Texas, and he'd gotten his wings. This is a picture of Casper, Wyoming, where he trained on heavy bombers, getting ready to ship overseas. Terrible weather, obviously way different than Marfa, Texas. You can see that my brother is wearing this little pair of baby slippers. That'll come into something I need to tell you later. And then he shipped off. But before he shipped off, it was so cold that winter that my parents went and had bought my brother that pair of baby slippers. And they decided to make a pact. My mom would keep one, and my dad would take the other overseas. One reason for good luck, but more so for the fact that hopefully he would be able to bring that slipper back and put it with the one that she had, and the slippers could become a pair as they would. This is a picture of his crew. He is the short one here. He was a co-pilot on a B-24 called Sugar Baby. They were based in Pantanella, Italy. He was in the 15th Air Force, running bombing missions into Germany. This is a B-24. This is not his. This is not Sugar Baby. Just to show what a B-24 looked like. I'm sure most of you know that. And then, this is one of the reasons I'm here tonight. On August 3rd, 1944, he was shot down. And it was 2 weeks later that my mom received this telegram. The Secretary of War desires me to express his deep regret that your husband, Second Lieutenant Robert R. Kurtz, has been reported missing in action since 3 August over Germany. If further details or other information are received, you will be promptly notified. So this came 2 weeks after, but my mom had no idea if he was injured, what shape he was in, where he was, and she had to wait. It's not like, obviously nowadays, it's a click on a computer and you can find out what's happened overseas in about 2 seconds. This was all waiting and wondering and hoping. Then 3 weeks later, on September 6th, which probably she told me was the 3 longest weeks of her life, she received this telegram from the International Red Cross. Report just received from the International Red Cross states that your husband, Second Lieutenant Robert R. Kurtz, is a prisoner of war with the German government, and a letter of information will follow. So at least she knew that he was alive. But here again, she had no idea what condition he was in. One interesting story that she told me was when these 2 telegrams came, especially the first one, the MIA one, a boy pedaled his bicycle up to their front door, rang the doorbell, and she saw him coming. And at the time, she didn't realize, she was wondering why it would be a boy. Well, there were 2 reasons. One, there was gas rationing going on, so they couldn't afford a car. And the second reason was most men were already in the service. So in one way, it was good to see a young boy pedaling up, because you knew that at least that telegram you're going to get meant that he possibly could be alive. If a came to the door with two men in uniform and a pastor, you knew that you were going to be a Gold Star family. This was a map that was sent out to most POW families. It was an insert, I believe, in Life magazine, showing the POW camps in Germany, of which there were over 50, and also Poland, Czechoslovakia. They were spread out through Europe so that people could try to follow their relatives, if that was possible, as they were moved out of camps to other camps. My father, after he was shot down, spent 3 days in solitary confinement in a place called Gulag Lu. And then they released him, and he was sent to Stalin 3, which is the site of the Great Escape, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. There was a movie made about it. He arrived a month after the Great Escape, so he arrived in really bad conditions. Hitler, if you know, had 50 of the 72 people that had escaped executed. They escaped from the compound that my father was in, so it was a rough time for him, as well as all the other people. He spent 6 months there, and at the end of January, Hitler ordered the evacuation of Stalin 3 on January 29th in a blizzard, horrible snowstorm, sub-zero weather. They were given 8 hours to leave the camp. There were 11,000 prisoners in Stalin 3, and they were able to get them all out within 8 hours. And as you can see, as they left, all they had was basically the clothes on their backs. Some of them made up little sleds to try to carry things, but it was horrible, horrible conditions. They had no idea where they were going. From there, they were sent to a place called Moscow for 2 days. They were marched all through the snow. This is all through January. And then to a place called Spremberg, where they were loaded onto cattle cars. Cattle cars were made for 40 men and 8 animals. They usually, on the average, put in 80 men, 80 POWs per car. There was no place to sit down. They all had to stand up. They fed them, as a horrible joke, a dinner of lard before they put them on these trains, and then sent them off. They couldn't sit down. It was a 3-day journey. They were allowed out of the train once in 3 days with no water, no food. You can imagine conditions inside that. My father spoke very, very little about the war, but one thing he told my mother that she transferred to me was that was the worst 3 days of his life. From there, they went to Nuremberg, from Nuremberg to a place called Moosburg. Moosburg was built for 20,000 POWs. When my father walked through the gates in early April, there were 130,000 POWs in that camp. And then, on April 29, 1945, they heard a rumble, they looked up on the horizon, and General Patton and his forces were knocking the fences down, and they were liberated. Interesting thing on this picture is, this picture here, believe it or not, there's a tank under there. That's how happy these men were to be liberated. General Patton came in the next day, and he professed to make sure he would take care of every German that made these men look the way they looked, and he tried. Now, I took this picture just this summer. I went back to Europe, because I had heard that outside of Moosburg, there were 2 steeples that flew the Nazi flag, and these POWs had to look at that every day. And when Patton came through, he ordered his men not to pull the flags down, but to shoot them down. So they shot the flags off the steeples, raised the American flag, and my dad's navigator, who I interviewed later on, said that was known as the day that over 100,000 men cried. And we're going to go back in time a little. This is a picture of my father and myself as a 1-year-old. I don't remember my father. I'll tell you that story in a second. But I always get a laugh out of this picture because this is one of the 3 pictures of myself and my dad. My oldest brother, there's about 300. You know, I have 4 boys in the family. My second oldest about maybe 100, then down to 30. By the time I came along, we didn't need to spend the money on pictures. But this was one of the very few pictures that I really love. And right after that picture was taken, the month later, it was March 28, 1952, my parents went out to dinner. It was their their 10th anniversary. He was married on March 28, 1942. They came home, my dad was complaining of indigestion, said he didn't feel well, so they went to bed early. My mom said that in the middle of the night he yelled, screamed out in pain, and he had died of a massive heart attack. He was 33 years old. My mom was 30, and she was suddenly a single mom of 4 boys, ages 2 to 9, of which I was the youngest. And there were 2 rules that came up immediately into the Kurtz household. I didn't know this until a little older, but number 1, we did not bring up my father. My mother just could not talk about it. It was too sudden. It was too much grief for her. So I never knew anything about my dad in my early life. The other thing was not to go up into the attic where the green box was. Just that was off limits. So my 3 older brothers, who were good listeners, didn't go up there, as far as I know. Myself, I did. I waited until I was about 8 years old, and because my older brothers had memories and I did not, I couldn't wait any longer. I went up there. I remember it was a really hot day in August, and I had my little flashlight went up, and I knew it was up there. And there it was on the bookcase shelf. I remember touching it, and my hands were burning, and I lifted up, and my 3 brothers were out somewhere, and my mom was vacuuming, and I was so afraid to get caught, because I would have been incredibly punished. But I was lucky enough to get into that box, and there were things that made no sense to me. I was 8 years old. There were medals and telegrams and love letters. Love letters are probably one of the reasons why she didn't want me in there. But the point was I couldn't ask her anything about it because I wasn't supposed to be up there. So for the next 10, 12 years before I went off to college, I was probably up there, I don't know, a dozen times so far. And as I got older, things started to make sense, and I read history books and understood what a Purple Heart was and an air medal, but still really didn't know much about his service and could not ask. Now this fellow, this is a picture of a man named Gerd Leitner. This is when he was an 8-year-old child, and this is kind of how my story all came together. It was the start of a lot of things that have happened to me that I can't understand, I will never understand. They're called karma, serendipity, whatever. But I feel like my dad's on my shoulder. I've met people that I have no right meeting that have integral parts to my dad's life. This fellow here, as an 8-year-old child, in Erwald, Austria, was sitting with his mom on the deck, and suddenly he looked up and he saw 8 bombers in the sky. Normally he would see 200 or 300 in their formations going from southern Italy over the Adriatic and the Alps and into Germany, but there was only 8 up there, and a couple were smoking. And he told me this story 50-something years later. And he said he suddenly looked up, and out of the clouds came 40 German fighters, and within 30 seconds, one pass, 4 German fighters per plane, all 8 bombers were shot down. My father was co-pilot on one of those planes. So in 2001, somehow he got the names of all the airmen that were involved that day, both German and American, and invited them or their next of kin back. And for a commemoration, which this is a monument built in the town of Erwald in the square that lists the 30 KIA that day. 30 of the 80 men, American airmen that day were killed. The other 50 were all POWs. It was a very sobering experience. And then these serendipitous things started happening. Gerd Leitner brought me in and he said, I'd like to meet you and meet this woman. Her name is Hilda Richter, and she has something to tell you. And she came over and she said that she was also an 8-year-old child in Erwald that day, and she was out having a picnic with her family. She saw an American airman come over the top of the hill. His bomber jacket was on fire, he was bleeding, and the Germans were right behind him. They knocked him to the ground with their rifle butts. They aimed the guns and they were going to kill him. And he reached in his pocket, because he couldn't speak German, and he pulled out a baby slipper. And hoping above hope that one of these men would be either a father or a family man. Well, it worked. One of them must have been. They took him prisoner. He was allowed to carry this. This is pretty much the only reason that he ever made it home as far as I'm concerned, and definitely the only reason why I'm standing here being held to talk to you. She witnessed the entire thing, and when she told me the story, I wasn't sure what she was talking about, and then I remembered the first time I went up to my attic as an 8-year-old child. As I said, there were telegrams and beautiful medals and everything, but there was a pair of baby slippers. Like, why? What are they for? Well, that was the answer. That's the baby slipper. Then, literally a half hour later, Gerd Leitner again took me over to meet these two German fighter pilots that had been in the air battle that day. This gentleman in the middle, this, by the way, on the right is my father's navigator, Joe's contact. This is Willie Unger. He was the commander of the 40 German fighters that went up there. One of the sweetest and wonderful men I've ever met. You can look at his face. He never changed expression. The war decimated him, decimated his friends, the Luftwaffe, but he came back to honor his friends and try to forgive and forget. He was a great man. We couldn't speak. We had an interpreter, but a really, really great guy. This fellow, on the other hand, was Oscar Bosch. Oscar Bosch looked at my name card and came right up to me and said, "Do you know, I'm the German fighter pilot that shot your father down." Well, first of all, I said, "Well, how would you know that?" And he said, "Well, there's a designation on the tail of every B-24 bomber, and I saw the red H right in my sights, and I had done my research, and yes, my dad was the red H." He continued to tell me what a beautiful day it was, how easy it was to knock all those planes out of the sky. A really annoying person. My son was with me. He was 19 years old at the time, thank goodness. Because the next thing he came to me as we were parting our ways, because I had to get away from him, was he said, it was like shooting ducks in a pond. That's exactly what he said to me. And Oscar would have had a bad day, because I'm not a violent person, but he was going to have a bad day. I knocked it for my son, so I thanked my son for that. He stayed away from that man the entire time I was here. Now this is a story that came up the next morning. We climbed to the crash site, which is 6,500 feet up in the Alps. We were able to retrieve a piece of my father's co-pilot seat, which is over on the table back there where my books are. If you want to see that was a wonderful experience. And then on the way back, a woman who had talked me into going over there in the first place said, I need to tell you a story that my dad told me. And she had talked me into going, so I said, okay, I'll listen, but you said that your father never talked about the war. She said, that's true, but he needed me to tell you this, and he continued to tell me that this is him as an 18-year-old. He was a gunner that day. He was a substitute gunner. He got 2 missions instead of 1 mission for a substitute. His parachute cords got caught up when the plane was hit and was going down. Everyone had bailed out already, except for the tail gunner who was KIA in the plane. And my dad was ready to bail out. He was the last one. He had that balloon in his leg, and Tony was screaming from up there. My dad went back in the plane, released his cords, and they both jumped out simultaneously to the wayside. And 5 seconds later, the plane blew up in the air. And she was able to tell me that story. This picture here was about 6 years later. He allowed me to come out to his home in Michigan, and at 87 years of age, and he told me the story once more, and then said at that time, as most veterans would say, I will never talk about it again. And that's the last time I heard about it. This is Charlie Sellers. This is the tail gunner I was telling you about. He was KIA that day. As many of you would know, especially as vets, a place to go after a bomber is always the rear of the plane. You take the tail gunner out. There's not too much defense there. There's a chapter in my book called Bringing Charlie Home. It's a sad chapter. It's his mom didn't know he was MIA, but she did not get the International Red Cross telegram, so she held hope and wrote letters back and forth. And I have all those letters that I got from her niece. And I have every single letter that he wrote from home, from training to the day he shot down, and then all the letters that she wrote trying to find out where he was. Eventually, once my father and the other fellows on that plane were released from their POW camp and debriefed, they told the story of how he was killed. And that was the story. And when I went back in 2010, my second time to Airwall, Gerd Leitner handed me a wedding ring and said that it had been taken off the crash site. And he asked me if I could try to find whose it was. And that's pretty much. This picture is a picture of Ken Sellers. It turns out that there were only 3 people married on that plane: my dad, the radio operator, and Charlie Sellers. So it was easy for me to figure whose ring that was. It was kind of hard for me to imagine someone would go up to a crash site and pull it off the dead man's finger, but that's what happened. But it was returned 6 years later. I was lucky to find a military genealogist. She traced it, and one of his brothers, his wife had died in 1970, but one of his brothers, Ken, right here, who was actually in Korea, lived up near Syracuse. I drove up there and heard the news to him and had to tell him the true story of how his brother had died. Another very hard thing to do. Then in 2012, a man from Boca Raton called me, who I thought had passed away. This is my dad's bombardier, George Britton. I flew down the next day because he wasn't in good health. We had great talks. He taught me a lot about my dad, good stories. And we were talking about the green box, and I said, that, about the medals, and he said he had never gotten his Purple Heart. And I said, well, would you be interested in getting one? He said, no, I'm 88 years old. I mean, it'd be nice, but where am I going to go? They lost the records, and there was a big fire, as many of you guys know, also in St. Louis in 1973. A lot of records were burnt. So basically, he thanked me for the idea, and I decided, heck, I'll give it a shot. And I became the biggest pain in the neck of his congressman down in Florida that anyone has ever been, and basically wore him down. And about 3 weeks later, he was awarded Purple Heart at 88 years old, and 2 months later, he passed away. But he did get his Purple Heart. Later on, we traveled. I have this just because of POWs. This is a Solid 3 scrapbook of clandestine photos that were taken inside the camp. Over 500 photos. This is in the archives of the Air Force Academy. A real pleasure to go up there. Of course, there's 11,000 men. I thought maybe I'd get a picture of my dad. That didn't happen. But it was an amazing, amazing book. Then we had a reunion of Solid 3 survivors, at least the ones that are physically able to get there. This fellow here was Gordon Jones, the one on the right with the hat. He was 92 years old, and my favorite part about that reunion was he showed up on a Harley at 92 years old. Drove up to the front of the hotel. We went out to dinner. He walked back faster than any of us to the hotel, and it turns out that he still is flying 3 different airplanes. He owns an airport down in Houston, so now he's flying, and he would now be 96. This is also when we were down in New Orleans. This is just a brick here, Robert R. Kurtz, U.S. Army Air Corps, that I donated a certain amount of money to the National World War II Museum down there, and if you do that, they will put a brick with whoever name you want. These sidewalks go all around the building. If you've never been there, that's the most amazing place I've ever been, the most amazing museum. A job really well done. And then this story goes along with all the other stories I have. My wife and I were sitting in the New Orleans airport, ready to go back, and I noticed an African-American gentleman in a wheelchair with a Tuskegee Airman hat on. So I went over and thanked him for his service and basically talked to him for a couple minutes and went back to my wife. And then I said to her, after all this happened, I've got to go back and I've just got to ask him the question anyway. So I went back and said, I hope I'm not bothering you, but when did you serve over there? He said, 1944. And I said, where did you fly out? And he goes, Italy. And I'm going, click, click. And he said, when? And I said, January to October 1944. All covering my father's time. So I said, can you do me a favor? I don't think you probably remember, but can you possibly check to see if you flew fighter support on August 3rd, 1944? And he said, well, believe it or not, I have all my flight logs. Now, Colonel McGee has the most combat missions of anyone in the Air Force ever. He flew 135 in World War II, 100 in Korea, and 174 in Vietnam, 409 missions. Never once got shot down. I gave him a copy of my book and signed it, and I said, Colonel, just when you get a chance, please call me and check the flight log. He called me at 8 o'clock the next morning, and he said, Jim, I was on your dad's wing. He flew on my father's wing the day he was shot down. Now, the odds of that happening, I wouldn't be able to tell you. We then later visited him in his home in Bethesda, and it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. It was like going to the Smithsonian Museum, pictures of him with 5 different presidents. He will be 100 years old on Pearl Harbor Day this year. And he's still, I just talked to him a week ago, he's fine. This is another strange event. This fellow's name is Frederick Irving. He was an ambassador to Iceland and Jamaica at different times, obviously. And he, for Nixon, he was also a POW and an Air Force pilot. And I didn't know anything about this fellow until somebody said, you need to read this obituary. And I started to read it, and it kind of lined up with my dad's. So I did a little more research and looked at my own green box, which is displayed back there on the table, the Purple Heart and the air medal, and some dog tags and his wings. And then I went to visit his son, who says, I just found my dad's own green box. And you can see Purple Heart, air medal, wings, you know, everything he pulled out of there until he showed me this, and then I almost fell down. That's a copy of my dad's interrogation form in Solid 03 the first day he was in there, which was August 10th or 12th. This is a copy of Fred Irving's, which is August 17th, also Solid 03. Also, they were sent to the North Compound. The North Compound was 98% RAF, 98% British, 2% American, so they were a distinct minority. My dad's number, because you had to get a little creepy dog tag, which I used to have, which I'll tell you about in a second. I don't have it anymore. I donated it. So I checked both of these. You can't see from where you're sitting, I'm sure, but it's the same handwriting. It was the same person that interrogated him. They went to the same camp, and then I got his book and read his account. He went to Nuremberg, he went to Moosburg, he went to Land's Hut, where they were flown to Camp Lucky Strike. He basically had to have known my father, and that would have been the only chance I would ever have had to talk to anyone that would have known and gone through that POW experience, but he had passed away. And I'm sorry for that. This is one thing I did not have that his son had. It was a piece of barbed wire from the last POW camp in Moosburg. I politely asked his son for a piece of that, and he politely told me no. This is a picture of Bob Cleverton coming near the end of my story. Kind of like what I did with George Ridden. Whatever I can do for Bess, I will. Bob lives down the street from me. I didn't know that. I met him at the supermarket in Schwaz like about a year and a half ago. He had a B-24 hat on, so I ran over to him and we talked, and I gave him a copy of my book, and he has problems reading, so he allowed me to come down. I found out later he lived 6 houses away from me, which is even weirder. And I came down and I read it to him. And as I was reading it, I was realizing he was flying missions into France. And I had another friend of mine that lived over in Brooksby Village, where my mom used to live, and he befriended me by seeing some late night speech that I had given there long before. And he had just gotten the French Legion of Honor. So I looked at Bob and I said, hey Bob, what the heck, let's, you know, he was an incredible pack rat, he kept everything. So he had all his records, and I said, you've flown into France, let's give it a shot. And I really didn't think anything was going to come out of it. And 5 months later, I got the letter from the consulate in Boston, and on Bastille Day this year, July 14th, we went down to Boston, and he was awarded the French Legion of Honor, which is right there. And to really kind of end up my story, this is what I went, this past summer, I should say, I went back one more time. I climbed the mountain again, which I have a little trail to show you very soon, and also went to the museum Solid 03, which is, there's only a museum there, obviously. The site is just a bunch of bricks and some foundations, no wood. All the pine trees that my dad and everyone else wrote about surrounded the area. And I decided it was time to donate a few things to the museum there. They get 15,000 to 20,000 visitors a year. So I donated one of each of his tags from the United States, one had all of his next of kin, which he trained, you know, when he wore when he trained, one when he flew combat missions, which had no information except name, rank, and serial number. But the main prize for me to give this curator of the museum was that middle one up on top. That's called a Kriege dog tag. That was my father's dog tag, number 7241. Believe it or not, it was 11,000 men that were in there. Not one person had donated their tag back, so it was a special prize for this man. And then I decided to heck, give him wings and give him a few more, get a lieutenant's bar. And then I decided, heck again, and I donated my dad's uniform to the museum. And he's kind enough to building a display right now. The only thing is that museum, that uniform still sits in my closet because we tried to find out what we'd like to send it over there, and they wanted something phenomenal, like $800, and it had to go through customs, and the curator told me don't do it because even if you do it, they have to, as you go through customs, they have to open it up, and it could very easily, mysteriously disappear. So that's still on its way. At some point in time, that will make its way to Solid 03. That's pretty much my story. I have a trailer I'd like to show you. We're gonna do a documentary. We're in the middle of doing a documentary already on my dad's experiences. A lot of it will do with PTSD, POWs, MIAs, and this is just one of the trailers we're doing. We'll show people what we've done so far.
You are here finally.
Yeah.
Great.
Doing, I don't know, lots of emotions, sadness, all kinds of emotions. Hard to explain. In early August this year, my desire to fill in the remaining pieces of the puzzle that made up the man, my father, Second Lieutenant Robert Kurtz, was paramount, and I was once again traveling with my son Mike. It was an important anniversary for myself and other friends who were part of the story. I was just looking at them. I was talking about the rental car a little bit. On August 3rd, 2019, we climbed into the rental car, the crash site in the Alps of my father's B-24 bomber, Sugar Baby. It had plunged into the mountainside after being shot down high over Austria 75 years before. Our ascent began in horrible weather, rainy and cold. It took longer than we had anticipated, but as we hiked over the last ridge and peered at the wreckage of Sugar Baby, the clouds parted and the sun shone brightly. Okay. First Lieutenant Lawrence R. Crane, Second Lieutenant Robert R. Curtis. And then, for whatever reason, I looked down at my watch. It was 11:55 a.m., the exact time, 75 years before, that my dad's bomber had crashed into the rental car. I have felt my father's presence many times now, but it always feels new. When the sun miraculously appeared, I felt him again. We traveled to Zagan, Poland, the site of Stalingrad 3, where my father was a POW for close to 6 months, from August of 1944 to January of 1945. The curator of the museum, Merrick Lazars, led me and Mike into the pine forest that surrounded the remains of my father's camp. This is what I need to do, stand in my father's footsteps. After a short walk, Merrick told me to stop in my tracks. He told me I was standing on the foundation of Hut 122 in the north compound of Stalingrad 3. My legs began to tremble and I felt a chill run up and down my spine. Merrick's words were confirmation. This was the foundation of your father's hut. This was where he had lived, been held captive, written letters home, worried about his wife and young son, and desperately waited for return letters that did not reach him. And it was the place from which he would ultimately set out on one of the most grueling marches in modern history. In that moment, I could feel it all. One other thing I'd like to bring up is, when I mentioned Charlie Sellers, who was my father's rear gunner. He had flown 33 missions. If you flew 35, you were allowed to go home. The night before, 3 airmen on my father's plane had been in a car accident. So 3 men had to be substituted. One of them was Charlie Sellers. If you substituted for a mission, you were granted 2 missions instead of 1. So Charlie, with those 2 missions, would have hit 35 and would have come home. They flew to Friedrichshafen, they got through all the flak, they got through all the fighters, they got back, they thought they were safe, and then my father's pilot made a mistake and held 8 planes back, and they were wiped out of the sky. Charlie was 20 minutes away from going home to his wife, and never made it. Thank you very much. Lots of emotions, sadness. Just hear that.
Thank you, Jim. Now we're going to do the missing person ceremony, and that will be narrated by Catherine Zelkowitz, and she'll be assisted by Lance Corporal Carolyn Lynch and Technical Sergeant Patrick Carlin.
The table is small, set for one. This symbolizes the vulnerability of a lone prisoner against his captors. The white tablecloth represents the purity of their responses to our nation's call to arms. The chair is empty, for they are not here. The wine glass is inverted. They cannot toast with us tonight. The slices of lemon remind us of their bitter suffering. The salt represents the countless tears of the families. The red rose reminds us of the loved ones who keep the faith, awaiting their return. The burning candle and yellow ribbon symbolizes the everlasting hope of reunion with the missing. All who have served alongside them, we have donned the same proud uniform. Being sworn to the same faith and allegiance, we will never forget their sacrifice. Until the day they return home or find eternal peace, we will remember.
Thank you, Catherine. That concludes our ceremony. I want to thank everyone for attending our POW MIA Chair of Honor ceremony. I would like to thank the following for all of their help and participation to make this event such a success. Our Ipswich Police Honor Guard, everyone who participated in today's program to set it up, make sure everything went off without a hitch. Members of the American Legion who are here, the VFW, the Polish League of American Veterans, and the AMVETS, thank you for your attendance. And thanks again to Jim Kurtz for his amazing presentation today. And also I want to let people know that Jim will be hanging around afterwards in the back if you want to get a copy of his book or ask him any questions. And there'll also be some light refreshments back there as well. I want to thank all the donors, local business owners and private donors for their generosity and support of this event, help pay for the cost of the chair and everything had up here tonight. And lastly, I'd like to thank everyone who attended tonight to honor our POW MIA veterans, ensuring that they will never be forgotten. And finally, God bless our POW MIA veterans, all of our veterans, those who served and those who continue to serve, and God bless America. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to welcome up our chaplain for the benediction.
Shall we stand? Receive now the benediction taken from the book of Numbers, chapter 6. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and give you peace, and give you peace, and give you peace forever. The Lord be gracious to you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace, and give you peace, and give you peace forever. Go in peace, everyone. God bless you.